this is Ebony.
And this is Zelma.
We are starting the third episode of the Woke.ish podcast. Thanks so much for listening. This week, the topic of discussion will be feminism. Super exciting. But before we dive into that, we'll start out with our shout-out segment.
So today, I wanted to shout out Desiree Linden, and I don't know if you've heard about her, but she is the first American woman to win the Boston Marathon since 1985. So not only being the first American woman to win it, but she also happens to be Latina, and so I was I'm just inspired and wanted to look up more about her because it's such a great feat, one, for me to finish a marathon, two, to win it, and three, they said that the weather conditions were really bad. It was raining, it was cold, and she's 34 and originally from California. She's a two-time Olympian. So, but what I really liked about her is that they were interviewing her, and there's this one quote that she says, and when she finishes, she says, "Stepping outside the comfort zone is the price I pay to find out how good I can be." And so I just think that, I'm not a runner or an athlete, but I just find inspiration in where I can, and hopefully you can too. And so just reminding us that sometimes it takes stepping outside where we're most comfortable in order to find out that we can be excellent. And so I just wanted to shout her out today and give her props and start this episode off with some positivity from a community that I'm from, being Latina, and just really proud to be able to just talk about her.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So now let's move on to our In the Know segment.
What's happening?
Brilliant. I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
So now for our In the Know segment. So there's been so much that has gone on in the last week or so. So for starters, Starbucks is under fire for more than one reason. I mean, just multiple instances of racial profiling in more than one establishment in the same week. It's kind of ridiculous. I guess maybe I should start with the less severe of them, or you think maybe the
which one's the less severe one?
I think the bathroom incident.
Okay, yeah, let's start with the bathroom incident, because that's something we can kind of all relate to, and I think some people might not see that as racial profiling, but we're going to discuss and break it down why it is.
Yeah. Okay, so as probably a lot of y'all know, Starbucks had a lot of bad publicity starting Monday in Philadelphia, and we're going to get to that, but then they also had an issue in Southern California, in Los Angeles. I was really sad to see this, where there was some young man named Brandon Ward, and I saw this tweet from Sean King. So Brandon Ward went to Starbucks, and he, I guess, was in there and then asked to use the restroom, and they told him no. Because he hadn't made a purchase, like he wasn't a paying customer. So then he's recording the whole time, and he waits for this white guy, I think his name is Wyndon or something like that, to come out of the bathroom. He starts talking to Wyndon, tells him that he looks really familiar, or looks similar to some celebrity or something like that. Just, I don't know, BS, before he got to the real issue, which was that asking Wesson whether or not he had made a purchase before he entered the bathroom, before he was given the code. And so now for our In the Know segment. So there's been so much that has gone on in the last week or so. So for starters, Starbucks is under fire for more than one reason. I mean, just multiple instances of racial profiling in more than one establishment in the same week. It's kind of ridiculous. I guess maybe I should start with the less severe of them, or you think maybe the
Which one's the less severe one?
I think the bathroom incident.
Okay, yeah, let's start with the bathroom incident because that's something we can kind of all
Yeah.
relate to, and I think some people might not see that as racial profiling, but we're going to discuss and break it down why it is.
Yeah. Okay, so as probably a lot of y'all know, Starbucks had a lot of bad publicity starting Monday in Philadelphia, and we're going to get to that. But then they also had an issue in Southern California, in Los Angeles. I was really sad to see this, where there was some young man named Brandon Ward, and I saw this tweet from Sean King. So Brandon Ward went to Starbucks, and he, I guess, was in there and then asked to use the restroom, and they told him no, because he hadn't made a purchase, like he wasn't a paying customer. So then he's recording the whole time, and he waits for this white guy, I think his name is Wyndon or something like that, to come out of the bathroom. He starts talking to Wyndon, tells him that he looks really familiar, or looks similar to some celebrity or something like that. Just, I don't know, BS, before he got to like the real issue, which was that asking Wesson whether or not he had made a purchase before he entered the bathroom, before he was given the code. And, Wesson innocently is like, no, I didn't. Like, I just asked for the code and they gave it to me. Kind of like, I mean, obviously, like, he's like, what's the big deal? Like, no, I just asked for the code. And so then Brandon walks with Wesson over to the counter and is telling the women behind the counter that, so Wesson didn't make a purchase and yet he was given the code. So what's going on with that? And then the woman is telling him, like, you are not allowed to record in my business. You are not allowed to record. Put your camera away. You're no longer allowed to be here. Please leave. And he's like, well, why wasn't I allowed to use the restroom? Does it have something to do with my skin color? And he continues to ask that. And then she says that this is a private business. You need to leave. You're not allowed to be here. And then goes and gets the security guard. And then they, make him leave. So I think that is kind of I guess maybe a lighter issue, or something that could be perceived as a lighter issue when we compare it to the other incident, which happened a few days prior in Philadelphia, where two black men were arrested, and like the police were called by one of the employees. And so I'm gonna actually play the police call that was made.
16:37 and 46 seconds.
Philadelphia Police, Officer 363, how may I help you? Hi, I have two gentlemen at my cafe that are refusing to make a purchase or leave. I'm at the Starbucks at 18th and Spruce. All right, please, I'll be on as soon as possible. Thank you. Bye.
So so that was the 911 call. So the fact that there was even a 911 call made by a Starbucks employee because she wanted these men to make a purchase or leave. Like, I have been studying at Starbucks since like my freshman year of college, and didn't always feel like first of all, I just started drinking coffee, so I never really felt inclined to purchase anything at that point. But then also, it's like that's not a requirement. There is no signage posted at any Starbucks. I've never seen where it says that you can't stay and lounge. Like, that's a regular thing. Like, I always see people kind of in there just chilling. There have been times where I've been in Starbucks the entire day, and there are tons of people just sitting there the whole day, talking, having business meetings. Like, it's not a mandate. So I wanted to read a little bit more of the details, and this is from USA Today. So in addition to the fact that they have released the recording, I wanted to read what the article says happened after that. So it says that call set events in motion that would lead to a series of apologies by Starbucks. At the Starbucks store that afternoon, the two men explained they were waiting for a friend. One had asked for access to the restroom and was denied because he hadn't bought anything, so similar to what happened a few days later in California. The manager then called police, even though even though Starbucks, with its comfy chairs and usually ample electric outlets for computers, has never shunned being a community melting pot. The incident raised issues of whether Starbucks has a double standard because of the belief that white men and women wouldn't have been asked to leave if they hadn't ordered food or drinks. And I think that that's pretty undeniable. Like, I don't think that there's any way of that Starbucks can deny that. In the recording, a police car is dispatched. Officers ask for backup, and a supervisor due to a disturbance at the Starbucks involving a group of males. Officers then indicate they're going to make the arrest and transport the pair. When the officers arrive, a patron videotaped the incident. The tape shows that the pair's friend, who is white, arriving and questioning why the arrests are taking place. The two men remain calm as they are handcuffed and led away. Starbucks didn't press trespassing charges. The pair were later released. So, I mean, this story is just full of ridiculousness, just full of, racial profiling. Just, I mean, people having too much power and the ability to use their discretion to decide who is able to stay in the establishment or not. And I think that most of the Starbucks are franchised. Yeah. So I think it's super interesting that they are still exercising, as a corporation, they're still exercising their ability to be like, we're instituting this across all the Starbucks, franchise or not. Because following these incidents, Starbucks announced that they were going to shut down 8,000 of their stores nationwide on is it May 29th or April 29th? I can't remember exactly what day it is, but they're shutting down all of their stores nationwide for racial bias training. And I mean, I think, I was planning to tie this into the shout out segment because I think that, that's super important. That's more than I have heard any other company or corporation do. I think that for the most part, companies, allow their employees to use their discretion to decide who is allowed in and who isn't. There have been, in the past few months, other instances that I've heard of that are similarly pretty outlandish. So, it's not just an issue for black men. There was also a situation where, I guess before I get to that, I should also mention that I think it was last week, there were also two men whose gym memberships at LA Fitness were terminated in California just because the manager, I feel like the manager was wrong and realized he was wrong because he had assumed that they snuck in, but one of the guys had been a member for 8 years. And so they called the police on them to have them removed. 5 police officers showed up, and the guy, he had his membership tag checked, and it confirmed that he had been a member. And even after all of that, the manager said that, he had the right to make anyone leave, to terminate any contract immediately. And so that's what he did. He terminated this guy's contract, who had been a member for 8 years. And the cops can't do anything about that at that point. The cops told the manager that we can't arrest them, we can't make them leave. They're members here, they're not trespassing. And so the manager terminated the contract so that they would then be trespassing and made to leave, which they were. And then a few months back, there was this story about 2 black women being racially profiled at an Applebee's. Oh, this was in February, at an Applebee's in St. Louis, where the restaurant staff accused the 2 women of leaving without having paid their bill during a previous visit. So I think that they had said, two women fitting your description left without paying their bill the day before or 2 days before. So the women were approached by a police officer, a mall security guard, and a restaurant manager. The police officer told the women that what they had been accused of and that they needed to leave. The women, of course, denied their accusation, said that they had never been to that restaurant before. And, they were saying that this is what black people have to deal with. In a written statement, Applebee's, they said that they regret any incidents like the one depicted in the video, but said it has found no indications that the store's actions were racially motivated. They said, our team has been working throughout the weekend and will continue to work to determine what happened and what appropriate measures will be taken. And this is from the CEO, Bill Gorgas or something like that, saying that they don't tolerate racism or bigotry of any nature. I mean, to say that you have no indication that this was race related, but you just made an assumption and walked up to two random black women and said, but with the cops and mall security, and said, y'all have to leave because y'all skipped out on the bill. And then when you find out that it wasn't even these weren't the women, then you're saying that it wasn't racially motivated? How is that? Like, first of all, there's so many problematic things, so many problematic assumptions. One, the assumption that all black people look alike, and that, oh, these are two women here dining together, so they must be the same two women that left the other night. And and y'all have access to video and footage. If you wanted to review it to fact check, to make sure that you were right, to make sure that you didn't offend them, to make sure that you weren't doing anything illegal, then you could have done that. But you didn't feel it was necessary to take that level of measure because that was going too far out of your way. Like, you felt like it was okay to just, go and have them forcibly removed. And then not only that, but they didn't even get to finish their food, and yet they're told, pay your bill and leave. Like, what? Yeah, I mean, so within this, racially profiling, we also have two others. Do you want to talk about the one with the kid in Rochester? Or let me pull up that story, because good Lord.
Yeah, well, just continuing, I feel like a lot of people are happy about the Starbucks doing the racial bias, but I just sometimes have to just say they literally have to teach their employees to treat people the same in 2018. And a part of me is maybe we should applaud them. But a part of me is no. That is so sad that your company... And then I want to think, what are you going to teach them? Yeah. How are you going to teach someone in one day how not to be racially biased? Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like in these... And before we move on to situations where the outcomes are more extreme because they result in death, these are outcomes where there's unequal treatment based on skin color, and it results in different experiences simply because you look different. And what sometimes I have a hard time with, and sometimes I have a hard time, is how even when we have video, the video, if you were talking about the bathroom situation where there was he videos him talking to the white guy saying, did you buy something before you got the code? No. Okay, let me ask them, why did he get the code without buying something and I didn't? And the response of the manager was, you can't record, I'm asking you to leave. This is private property. You don't have a right to be here. And then the gym story where you're saying that when they showed scan my card and see that I am a member, even when you're right, they can still say, yeah, but this is private property. I want you to leave. So a part of me is even if we show people that there's evidence that people are discriminated against, because this is a type of discrimination. Being treated differently because of what you look like is discrimination. So even when we show instances of discrimination, that will not always equal that you will be treated better or differently. Yeah. That may equal that they will ask you to leave. So you can be in the right and still be asked to leave. So as a person of color, as a person who is non-white, I ask myself, then what am I supposed to do? Because if we're taught, oh, just explain, just point out that there's differential treatment, they'll get it. And it's no, they won't. They'll either call the cops or they'll ask you to leave. And then what are we supposed to do then? Are you really going to fight with the cops? Are you really going to fight with the manager? No. And so these situations that are in spaces that you wouldn't think that this would happen, like a coffee shop or a gym, to me highlight just everyday interactions that can be really problematic and that can contribute to just really negative experiences, and experiences that highlight that that to some people you are not an equal because of what you look like. And so that kind of brings up to these next stories that we're going to talk about, which is what happens when that means that you die.
Yeah.
When not being equal is equivalent to you just die.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so one other thing that I want to say before we transition is that I think that the reason that even after they are proven wrong, even after you show them that, hey, you are biased, you are prejudiced, I think that there is a fear among, like, being racist or being accused of being racist is so politically charged that people don't even want to accept or admit to themselves or admit out loud that they were racially, that their decisions or their choices were racially motivated. And I think it's just out of fear. I think it's like oh, well, damn, now I'm caught. And because I don't want to face the truth, because I don't want to face that, oh, I might be one of those people that everybody talks about, that everybody, talks shit about. Because there are a lot of people that say, a lot of people that think that being racist is confined to using racial epithets.
Yeah.
To using the N-word, to saying, and that isn't the extent of it. And so I think that recognizing that isn't the extent of it, and recognizing that, oh, you might be one of them, is a scary thing and something that people don't want to admit, even if it is on camera. And I think that that's why we have these issues with, say, like, police and stuff like that, who, even after killing unarmed black people, they still cannot acknowledge that any of that has to do with racial profiling. Because they want to make it about all of these other things, oh, criminality, oh, intention, oh, violence, which they don't understand are racially motivated ideas. So if you subscribe to the idea that black people are more likely to be criminal, black men are more likely to be violent, aggressive, or to have done something illegal, to have been deserving of, being arrested, or if you see a black man and your automatic assumption is guilt, that is racist. And I don't think that that's something that we talk about enough. I think that we're at a point where we are so stagnant in terms of how we deal with race issues because we are so limited in our conception of what racism even is. And so I think that that's a big part of the problem, is that we don't have a clear and updated, like, definition. We're still operating using the definitions from the 1960s, back when discrimination and racism were legal. And so people are thinking that, oh, well, because we don't do that, because none of this is institutionalized necessarily, then it isn't racist. And it's like, no, you can still be motivated by racist ideology and act in racist ways. So, like, moving on to this next story about the 14-year-old kid in, where was he? Rochester, Michigan.
14-year-old kid.
A child. So, a 14-year-old African-American boy stopped to ask for directions to school, in a Detroit suburb. So this is Detroit, but was shot at instead. So Jeffrey Ziegler, apparently he was arraigned Friday because he shot at this little black boy who was asking him for directions to school. Also, what's super crazy to me is that Jeffrey is a retired firefighter.
Oh, yeah, and he shot him with a 12-gauge shotgun.
And it says, like, he was arraigned on assault with the intent to murder. Like, just really take a second and think about that. That he saw a little black boy in broad daylight, and his response was to shoot at him, and then ask questions later. And with the intent to kill him, because the assumption was that he was gonna rob him or something. So I want to read the quote from the little boy. The little boy's name is Brandon Walker. So it says that he overslept and missed the bus to school Thursday morning. He didn't have his phone. He tried to trace the bus route, but ended up lost and began knocking on doors for directions. And so this is now quoting him. I got to the house and I knocked on the lady's door. Then she started yelling at me and she was like, "Why are you trying to break into my house?" This is what he told the news station. And then it says, and I was trying to explain to her that I was trying to get directions to Rochester High, and she kept yelling at me. The guy came downstairs, and then he grabbed the gun, and I saw it, and I started to run. And that's when I heard the gunshot, he told the station. So luckily, this little boy was not hurt. He ran away. He hid and cried, it says. And, I mean, I don't, like, it says that the sheriff's deputies were called to the person that shot at him, to Jeffrey Ziegler's house, at 8:20 a.m. So if they were called to his house at 8:20 a.m., that means that this man was shooting at him like at the crack of dawn. Like, it doesn't occur to you. You don't see a little boy and assume that, oh, maybe he needs help. Maybe he is, like, why is this little boy on my porch by himself in the morning? That's not what occurs to you. What occurs to you is that, oh, this child must be trying to rob my house at 8 a.m. On a Thursday. Like, that is ridiculous. And so I think that this man, like many others, might argue that he is not racist, that he doesn't have a problem with black people, that it's not about the color of this kid's skin. But no, the assumption of criminality, the assumption of guilt, the assumption of ill intent without asking any questions, regardless of whether you ask questions. If you see a black man and your reaction, your gut reaction is to be fearful, you're racist. Like, there is no other way around that. There's no explanation that's justified. And I think that the sooner that we identify and stick with the definition of racism, and people understand where their thoughts and their fears come from, the sooner we'll be able to rectify and mitigate some of these issues that continue to happen. Because people aren't thinking twice before calling the police. People aren't thinking twice before shooting. Yeah. Even though they can see on the news, they hear about it constantly, about unarmed black men being killed by police, being killed by these police adjacent people, these people that think that they are vigilantes or whatever. Like, no, I think that we need to check ourselves, even for thoughts that we aren't necessarily proud of. Like, no, maybe it doesn't feel good to be called racist, but that's what you are. So don't sit there and fester like, oh, I can't believe that those words are being directed at me and blah, blah. No, fix that shit, because this is causing people their lives. Like,
yeah, and what gets me is that, I'm all about statistics and looking at, numbers and evidence, and we know, first of all, there are way more white people than there are people of color. Preach. Hence the term minority. Preach. So in numeric terms, more white people commit crimes than people of color. Just do. And we also know that across race, people commit crimes at the same rate. They use drugs at the same rate, commit crimes. However, there's a systematic detention and arrest of people of color because police and criminal justice seek out people of color to arrest. Seek out. So it's not that they commit crimes more often or more. They actually commit them the same rate as white people. But the only reason why there's a disproportionate number of people of color in jails and prisons at this moment is because there is evidence that the criminal justice system intentionally stops people of color, arrests people of color, and that's rooted in what you're talking about, that non-white is always seen as criminal, non-white is seen as threatening, non-white is seen as negative, and white is seen as just okay. And so I bet that if this little 14-year-old boy would have been white, they wouldn't have called the cops.
He probably would have been invited in for
breakfast. They wouldn't have assumed he was breaking in, and the only reason they assume he was breaking in is because he was a black boy. And I feel...
And who breaks in and knocks on the door?
I know. And so with all this evidence, and like you were saying, like, we got to check ourselves, and I'm saying, like, no, we got to check white people. Because
no.
Sometimes it's like not... like, it just, like, it can't just be us, because even when we show you that there is discrimination, that there is unfairness, and that there is that the statistics don't reflect what's happening, there's still not a change. And so that I mean, in order for that to happen, I mean, maybe this racial bias training will work.
I think it's a step, because I don't see, and I guess what I'm doing is essentially comparing Starbucks to the worst, not the best, because there are a lot of companies that have accusations of racial profiling and bias filed against them, and they don't do anything but deny it. Yeah. And so I think that, the amount, like, Starbucks is going to lose so much money in that day. Nationwide. Yeah. Like, Starbucks is the highest grossing cafe in the country. Oh. And so, I mean, they make it's ridiculous how much money they make. So the willingness to shut down all of your businesses, to execute that kind of order, I think is, I don't know, I think it's admirable. And I think that Starbucks is showing themselves as a company that people, I think, will hopefully follow suit. Other companies will hopefully follow suit, because I think that it's not being brought to these employees' awareness that how they're behaving is unacceptable. If a company does not make it known that what you're doing does not match our company's ethos, does not match or align with our company's mission, then I think it falls back on the company as well. Like, it's not just these employees. These companies can be the most well-meaning, can do all the charity work and do all these different things for the community. But if you allow your employees to act on their racial bias in your establishment, and you don't do anything about it, anything drastic to show the country, to give the country a little bit of, and the communities that you serve, a little bit of faith. Because, I mean, black people buy tons of coffee, and you think, and black people know how to boycott. Like,
yeah, I mean, and I'm also like, fuck, I have to be scared now that some white lady's gonna tell me that I'm not buying things, so I don't deserve to be there. And it's like, oh, a whole new, additional thing that I have to look out for and check. Yeah. Am I being treated differently as I sit here at Starbucks compared to another woman who happens to be white? And I feel like in these couple of instances we've been talking about, the outcomes have been terrible, but when it results in a death, I feel like it just makes it that much harder to not be okay, but just to, like, navigate this world when there's not outrage or I don't know, just indignation.
I think that people are numb, honestly. So this next situation, or I guess fatal incident that occurred, was in California. There was a Walmart shooting, murder of a young 26-year-old man named Deontay Yarber. So Deontay Yarber was murdered in the car of, I guess in his cousin's car, and there were 3 other passengers in the car, and one of the friends was inside in the store, and that's why they were in the car in the first place. So this was, I believe 10 a.m.
Yeah, again, in the morning, broad daylight, yes. In a parking lot.
In a public parking lot. So someone observed Deontay and his friends in the car, called the police, said that, they looked suspicious. So the cops came out in full force. Not sure what the actual interaction was like, but the police have stated that the car was actually driving toward them, and so that's why they shot at this car, because ultimately they unleashed 30 gunshots. 30. They shot at this car 30 times, killing Deontay, injuring the other people in the car. And I watched a video, so someone recorded this, and somebody recorded this on Snapchat and put it on YouTube. And so in the actual video, even though the cops are saying that this car was driving toward them, And that's why they were shooting at it, because it was driving toward them aggressively. In this video, you see the car driving in reverse. So because Deontay was in the driver's seat and all of the bullet holes are on the driver's seat in the windshield, that would mean that the police were standing in front shooting. Yet you see this car reversing, which, I mean, blows the BS out of the water. And yet, I mean, time and time, I would not be surprised if these officers are acquitted, because there have been other instances in the past where officers have said that one thing happened, and then the video is released, or the body cam video is released, and it reveals that all of what they were saying were lies, and yet nothing happens.
Yep. And they're unpaid administratively.
Yes, paid. Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway from all of these is that black bodies, and I mean, I would extend this, I guess before I get to that, I should also say that this was not the first shooting and murder of a black man at a Walmart in California. So a week before that, there was also another black man shot and killed at a Walmart in Los Angeles. And I think that the assumption of guilt, the assumption or the fact that police have the capacity to shoot and kill and then ask questions later and then find out that, oh, this person was unarmed. The thing that we thought was a gun was a cell phone. The thing that we thought was a gun was a wallet. The thing that we thought was a gun were Skittles. Like, there are just so many assumptions, and I think that it's one thing for a Starbucks employee to act on their racial bias and call the police. I think that it's an entirely different thing, and maybe not entirely different, actually. I think that it's also another thing for police officers to act on their racial bias and shoot and kill. But I think that where the missing link is that we are assuming that the people that are calling the police are not at fault for what ultimately happens. Yeah. You are, in my mind, just as much as at fault. Like, the police are not race neutral. And we all know that. I think that a lot of people, because they don't want to believe that, a lot of white people, because they don't want to believe that about the police, they are unwilling to admit that our law enforcement are an issue, are problematic, and are racially prejudiced. And so you picking up the phone and calling the police because two men won't pay or leave at a Starbucks where that is the norm, you have blood on your hands if something escalates beyond that. Because these men could be sitting at the table with their cell phones in their hands, and then cops just assume that they have guns and then they shoot them. And it's like, oh, well, I was just doing my job. I was just calling the cops. No. Yeah. These situations escalate so quickly. And so I think that the people that are calling the police based on their racial bias are also implicated in these murders. So the people that called the police about Deontay Yarber and his friends sitting in the car in the morning, and which ultimately resulted in his death, that person is also implicated in his death.
And that person's racist.
Yes, and that person's racist.
If you see,
you can just mind your business.
If you see people of color, black people, Latino people, and you instantly think threat, they don't belong, they must be bad, you are racist. I don't care if you're saying, well, I'm just looking out, I'm trying to be a good citizen, I'm just trying. No, you are racist. And that is a form of racism. We're no longer, but it's illegal technically to segregate. It's illegal to not allow people based on their race to enter your premises, but we are finding other ways to be racist. And one of these ways is by instantly thinking that a black body is a threat to you and assuming that the only way to address that threat is to call the police with guns. And I just don't see, I do see, because in order It takes a lot of denial, a lot of work for you to convince yourself that you are not racist.
No, they are doing work. They are working overtime, trying to find other ways to explain their thoughts and their behavior. Mm-hmm. Because I just don't, a parked car at Walmart does not stand out.
No, go inside Walmart. Have you been inside Walmart? There are people there that I'm like, if that's threatening, then everything is threatening. I'm just not talking about race. I'm just talking about just being in Walmart.
Yeah, it's just everybody's so aggressive, and I mean there are always hundreds of vehicles parked outside Walmart. So how does this one car stand out to you as so suspicious that you need to call the police?
Because it was a nice car and there was black people in it, and the person who called was racist because lots of people saw that car. Did lots of people call?
No, lots of people just minded their business and kept it pushing. Take your ass home. If you don't want to be around this suspicious car, then go home.
Yeah.
Go home. And so now, I mean, the most heartbreaking, I think, realization is that now Deontay's 3 children will grow up without their father.
Mm-hmm. His mom will grow up, will grow older without his family. It's not just one person. And not only his family, but the community. It takes a toll on people to see someone. If you're a good person, it takes a toll to think that a father woke up and he died being in his car. And not only died, but was being shot at 30 times. Brutal. It's a terrible way to go.
30 times.
And to have your kids know that.
30 times.
No one should.
I mean, what... I just don't understand what could be going... Because now, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I don't even see humanity in these police officers. Because how do you feel comfortable? How do you feel I mean, what goes through your mind, in your heart? What are your feelings when you shoot at someone 30 times? Mm-hmm. One bullet can kill somebody. Yeah. So what is it that you're trying to do? How angry are you? These cops have some real issues. And we need to stop pretending that there is not a selection bias in terms of who chooses to enter the police academy. There is selection bias. We could probably get these people psychologically tested and find a very common thread among all of them.
Yeah.
Because everybody's not just waking up or growing up wanting to be cops.
Yep.
There's a select few people. These are select group. These are certain type of people. And so if there are a bunch of people with Napoleon complexes, a lot of men who are trying to boost or elevate their masculinity, who are choosing to be cops because they have free reign to, beat on people, mess with people, shoot people. I think that we need to pay more attention to that, particularly as the media is depicting all of these instances where cops kill people and then are acquitted. Mm-hmm. We need to pay attention to the next generation of police officers, because there could be people that are, if we want to claim, or if police officers want to claim that the people that are killing these unarmed black and brown people are not racist, there may be people who actually are racist, overtly and explicitly, that are then motivated to enter the police force because they can then police black and brown bodies. I don't understand why no one is willing to look more internally at this, especially if it could diffuse a lot of racial tension in our country. This has been an issue for decades, and it would make things, if we are actually truly concerned about peace and racial equality in the way that so many people pretend, you can't convince me that that's your interest if you could just with one fell swoop find a way to rectify it, and you're not doing that. I think that our government is at fault. Mm-hmm. Everybody's at fault because they're ignoring something that's so plain. It's right there in our faces. Psychologists have so many tests for racial bias.
Yeah.
where, like, you know, using the attribution words and stuff like that, using, you know, like having to respond to what are those, like the pictures or whatever?
Yeah, like looking at how your brain.
Yeah.
So people who are like, yeah, but perceptions, attitudes, how can you really test that? No, they not only do that, but they look at your brain and the brain waves and how that reacts to certain pictures, and they see that there are certain pictures that are associated with fear and negative feelings, and that has consequences. And it's specifically when, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not just cops that are racist, but when you have a racist person or you have someone who does racist things and they're a cop and have guns, then that's a whole different level. So yeah, I think everyone should have racial bias. I think there are a lot more racist people than I think like most people are probably racist because they're not aware of their racial bias. But with cops, it's a whole different thing. Yes, I have different expectations from you. I want you to have a psychological test. I want you to do all these things because ultimately you have a gun and you will be able to shoot at whatever you want, and evidence shows that you can get away with it. And so I think that we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold them more accountable. And this isn't police hating. This isn't police bashing. This is two people who not only are trying to talk about evidence that shows that they're in the wrong, but also as people who can one day be affected by this. It's just like for our communities, like this is a problem, this is an issue, and this is something that America has to get better at. They just have to.
I think that the biggest problem is that people are more afraid of being labeled racist than they are of actually proving with their behavior that they aren't.
Yeah.
And I think that we are putting way too much trust in people's words. You know, just trusting that because someone said they aren't racist, then they aren't.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, they said they aren't, so let's just keep it pushing. No. No. They're, like Zelma just laid out, there are actual ways that have scientific validity that we could use to prove whether someone is or isn't. Mm-hmm. You can just, you don't have control over your brainwaves.
No.
You don't. So if a black man's face flashes on the computer screen and your brain waves indicate that you are afraid, then that's what you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to start relying more on science than we do on people's own descriptions or descriptions of their attitudes. Like we trust that way too much. These people are not all good. They're bad people, and I've heard so many cops say this. There are bad people in every field. Yes, there are bad people in every field. But the difference between the guy that's racist or that has racial bias, that's the manager at LA Fitness, and the woman that has racial bias that is racist at Starbucks, and the racist cops that killed Deontay Yarber, there's a very big difference there. You know, in terms of their ability to act on their racial bias and in the ways that they do it.
And the consequences
to that. Consequences. Like, doctors get fired for malpractice.
Yeah.
Their licenses get revoked if they do something by accident and someone dies. And yet, cops, we just act like, just a day's work.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
So I strongly suggest that you wake the fuck up.
Now we're going to transition it into our what's being slept on topic for the week, which is
feminism. And so I was really excited about this topic because I feel like there's so many different variations of feminism, there's a lot of confusion as to not only what feminism is, but where feminism came from and what feminism does. And so I wanted to start this conversation by talking about someone that I have a love, not a hate, but a love and like, girl, what relationship? And that's with Amber Rose. And so I follow her on IG. I was all down for her on 21 Savage.
You are a minority.
I feel like sometimes she has good points. She makes good points in terms of saying that there's a double standard in how men and women are perceived. Mm-hmm. So men can be sexy, men can be sexual, and that's good. But if women are sexy and women are sexual, then they're sluts. And so she has this thing called a slut walk, and she does it yearly. At Coachella, she was with the squad. And one of the reasons that I stand more behind Amber Rose is because she's a advocate for the LGBT community. In her squad, she has gay men, and they were all wearing cheerleading outfits. And on the front of the cheerleading outfits, it said slut. Her kind of thing is taking back slut, owning it, making it yours, so that, and it's not just something that happens with the word slut, but something that happens with other words too, where people feel like they can get empowered by taking back that word and using it themselves and reframing it and making it mean something else. And so for her, she wants to take back slut, and instead of making it negative, making it positive. But sometimes I just feel like what she claims is feminism isn't exactly doing anything to advance issues of feminism. And so I wonder, and one of the things that I talk about is, as a health researcher, are the high mortality rates of Black women, and so specifically the high maternal mortality rates. And so in the United States, Black women have really high percentages of dying at giving birth, and then within a year after they give birth, which is a really sensitive time. And what's bad, other than Black women dying, is that it's a really, really high percentage compared to other countries that we consider quote unquote less developed. So for a country like the United States that has has some of the best technology in terms of medical technology, so many Black women are dying from things that they could easily, and I think Serena Williams actually talked about this, about how she could have died. Yeah. And so when I hear things like that, and I see like Amber Rose as a Black woman, like, why is it only sexuality stuff? Why is it only like, I can be sexy, I have a right to be sexy? Why is it not, let's educate people about this issue, let's do something about this issue? Black women like me are dying giving birth. I'm a mother.
I'm sure she doesn't even know.
Yeah, and that could be a point too, is that she may not know. And so that's why I'm conflicted. And so it got me thinking, like, okay, if I don't think that Amber Rose is all the time promoting causes that I would argue are important for feminism, then one, what is feminism? And two, what is the agenda? What is the feminist agenda? What is it that we're seeking? And so I wanted to start off this conversation by just putting on the table and saying, what is feminism? Because I don't know if I think a lot of people think they know what it means, but it's one of those things that once you start asking people, you'll see that there's different variations of what they think it is.
Yeah, I think pretty generally I would say that feminism is not Amber Rose and what she's doing, and it isn't the slut walk. I mean, I think that the cause that she's so passionate about is an important one, and it's a reality, like you're saying, that there's a double standard, but I don't think that Amber Rose is doing anything about it in the way that she thinks that she is. I don't even know if she thinks that she is, because for all Amber is doing is exercising her right to be naked, which nobody was getting in the way of that before. No fewer people are calling you a slut or whatever than were doing it before. And so for Amber Rose, I remember last year where she put up the picture of her naked with with her vagina out. Yeah. And so I think that and the caption was like feminism or something like that. And Instagram took it down. Yeah. And then she posted a video of herself talking about, oh, when Instagram takes down your feminist photo, but it's already gone viral and been reposted everywhere. And it was like, okay, Amber, good job. People would have taken that photo, reposted it. Hella people probably got it as their screenshot, right, or their screensaver right now, and they would have done it regardless of the feminism caption. Nobody cared. Instagram did not see it as a feminist photo. They saw it as you being naked, which they don't allow. And so I guess maybe another thing that she was trying to highlight was that she had pubic hair. And so that was like this big thing because women, I don't know, I guess pubic hair is not feminine or sexy these days.
Yeah, people think that being like naked is what's sexy.
Like hairless.
Yeah, like no. I mean hairless.
Yeah, and I think that that's perfectly fine, but I do not think that that's this super like controversial thing that you're doing. You're not knocking down doors or opening doors for women by having this slut walk. Like it's just not happening. And so like you're saying with Serena Williams, you know, she has like thrown a lot of money at organizations and nonprofit orgs where the crisis of Black women and the maternal mortality rates are a central focus. And I do think that is core to what feminism is. But along with that, I think that what I am more inclined to identify with and what appeals to me more are the tenets of intersectionality theory. And I think that I've always kind of subscribed to that, even before knowing even before knowing the word intersectionality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I think that I always kind of felt uncomfortable in learning about, you know, feminist movements and kind of being like, well, that those motivations sound mainstream and middle class and white. A lot of the like central focus and motivations for the feminist movement, especially early on, like I just never identified with it. And it was something that I also didn't feel comfortable saying out loud, because I'm like, okay, what kind of progressive woman am I to be like, I don't know about this doesn't sound like it's for me, you know? And so I think that there is a lot of division within the feminist movement today. And I think it's because there are so many different people that identify as feminists across different disciplines and fields, but there's no consensus about what the motivation is. So you have like academics and academic feminism, and then you have people like Amber Rose, or like, maybe I shouldn't group all the celebrities together, because you like Beyonce identifies as a feminist, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't put her in the same group as Amber Rose.
Yeah.
And then have like intersectionality theorists and scholars like Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins. And I think that that's kind of been like my lane. And then you have, you know, practitioners and stuff like that who I think that maybe Patricia Hill Collins and Kimberly Crenshaw would also kind of identify themselves as such. But I mean, those people are also important, but I think that they all have different ideas of what feminism is. So if you want to like walk us through those waves.
Yeah. So first, just to give a little overview, this is a topic that I wanted to talk about. One, because gender and sexuality is like our bread and butter. Yeah. It's like what we actually choose to study. And so just giving a little historical overview, first wave feminism was in the 19th and earliest 20th century. So that's like the 1900s up until the 1950s. And so the focus of first wave feminism was on women's suffrage, meaning women's right to vote, women's right to have property, and women's right to run for office. And so, but the problematic thing for that is 1910 to 1950, it was mostly focused on the issues of white women, and most of the women who were kind of highlighted and who are always recalled as these are, you know, our founding mothers are white women, even though I don't think I can't believe that there weren't women of color who were also like, yo, I want to vote. But the ones that we mostly highlight in history and the ones we mostly talk about in pop culture are white women.
Yeah, Sojourner Truth has that speech published, Ain't I Woman?
Yeah.
And well, one, at the time, you know, black people weren't even considered human, let alone like being given the right. Like, you can't have the right to vote if you're not even considered human.
Yeah.
But then at this time of first wave feminism, white women were viewed or kind of seen as being on the same level as children, and like needing to have a man to support them and guide them and make sure that they didn't like just trip over and fall, I guess.
Like they
or
weren't,
catch a chill.
Yeah, like they weren't like they weren't capable of making decisions and of doing things.
Which is why marriage rates, or the age of marital entry was so young then, because it was like, okay, well, your parents and your dad are taking care of you, but you can't just be let out into the world. You got to transition from your father to your husband, which is why, you know, they have that ceremony and weddings and all of that. But that's a whole other story.
So first wave feminism is like, okay, let's vote, let's own property. That's all cool. Second wave feminism we have around 1960s through 1980s, and that focused mostly in reducing inequalities in family, in the workplace. So here we have women entering the labor market. We have more women going to college, using their degrees, getting jobs, and also rights, abortion. And so that was a lot of the motivating there, was women's right to be able to claim to make decisions over their own bodies.
Did you say birth control?
Oh, and birth control. So birth control and abortion, just like overall reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And so, and I think this is what most people are familiar with, like the 60s, abortion, birth control, sexuality. Here's when we have, you know, if you watch movies where they have like the housewife in the 60s reading, you know, their magazines, trying to get like empowered. So that's, I think, what people are more familiar with. And then we have third wave feminism, which is from 1990s to about 2008, something around that time. Again, these are just like time intervals that people have created, but I'm sure that there's a little bit of sway there. But in third wave feminism, focusing mostly on embracing diversity, and this is where we have people like Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins kind of calling into attention that the voices of non-white women have kind of been pushed to the side, and the agenda seems to really put forward a lot of issues that impact middle-class white women and not women who don't share those experiences. And then there apparently is a fourth wave feminism that is all the way from 2008 through 2010. And I say apparently because I don't feel like we've quite gotten past the embracing diversity in feminism.
No. I think that there's some stuff that I've read that says that we're still in third wave right now.
Yeah. So I would consider us still kind of third wave, but I guess like the next kind of wave, which is generated by something we're going to talk about, which is focusing on combating sexual harassment and sexual assault. So I think that like things like the Me Too movement and stuff like that, where we're particularly focused on sexual violence against women, on assault on campus, on Chapter 9, things like that, where we're specifically focusing on sexual assault and violence, is fourth wave feminism. But that's the chronology of feminism. And I think that many people generally would say that feminism is promoting the equality among gender so that men and women are equal. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a definition that a lot of people get behind. And that's one that I've heard most commonly in mainstream, is that I'm all about equality. I'm all about being equal. And so I wanted to pose to you, Ebony, like to you, do you consider yourself a feminist? And if you do, then what does your feminism look like?
No.
Okay.
I don't. And I think that I haven't really said that to many people out loud just because, you know, I'm mostly in academic settings. Mm-hmm. And I think that in academia, being a woman equals being feminist.
Yeah.
And I think that even a lot of men in academia would probably identify as feminism just because academia, for the most part, is viewed as a pretty progressive and liberal space where you're supposed to be interested in equality for everyone. So if that means gender equality, and if we are saying that, or if the general kind of assumption is that feminism means gender equality, then I think that most academics identify as feminist. But similar to the kind of what you laid out in the different waves, like, I don't subscribe to feminism because I don't think that, even as much as we try to push for it, even as much as women of color try to interject themselves and we try to, or even, I mean, mainstream feminism is not just, in my opinion, racist, but also classist. So a lot of the concerns that motivated the kind of start of the feminist movement are concerns, like you said, that white middle-class women had. So if you think about where feminism started and wanting women to have the right, or like the labor force rights. So there was a time when women supposedly couldn't or didn't work, and they were kind of just left to take care of the home. Like, that was their job. And which is, I mean, people might hear that called like unpaid domestic labor. But at this time when these women were pushing for this right to work and right to equality in the labor force and the right to be seen as more than just a wife and a mother, women of color were working and had been working for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, we can't forget that in this country, black women were also slaves. Mm-hmm. And they were doing a lot of time the same work that the men were doing. Mm-hmm. And so, this concern about like, oh my God, I don't want to be relegated to the house, and I don't want to be just a wife, and I don't want to be just a kid, just a mother. Black women didn't have that concern or that ability to choose between the two. Like, it was like, no, you work. That's what you do. And because a lot of the time, the men, especially like say during slavery, right, men were taken from their families. and sold, like, the families were broken apart and the men are sold off somewhere else. So it's the mom being the mother and working. So it wasn't, I mean, she didn't have the opportunity or the privilege to be a wife. So there was no choice to be made. And I think that a lot of the assumptions that underlied the start of the movement have kind of been maintained, but in silence. You know, so, I mean, if you think about this last election, and when you think about who, like, what women voted for Donald Trump. What women voted for Donald Trump? White women. And so it's like, y'all, like, there is no sisterhood there. Like, where was feminism there when you decided, I'm not going to check the box for the woman, the first woman that has a chance at the presidential office. I'm not going to, I think that even if you don't like her, the fact that she could have been the first woman president and you didn't even feel charged up enough to help that happen, is enough to let me know that we are not a part of the same movement. So no, like, I don't do feminism. I'm all for gender equality. I think that I identify much more with intersectionality, and I think that it's just because in the way that I study it, in the way that I employ it in my research, accounts for race and class in a way that mainstream feminism does not. Like, they just don't get behind those issues. You don't hear them, you know, like, if you think about the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas case in the 90s, like, where were the feminists then? When she was, you know, dealing with sexual assault and harassment. Like, they weren't there. And so, and I think also recently with the Me Too movement, when Lupita came forward and said, like, oh yeah, I've had similar issues. Where were the feminists then? The Me Too movement wasn't even like, it was like a joke to them. Like, oh, this black woman, because black women are viewed as hypersexual. And so it's like, oh, well, if you had this kind of attention, you must have done something to ask for it. You know, or you must have asked for it. You must have done something that made him think that this was okay. But it's like, oh no, like, poor, like, little white actresses, like, they were attacked. We need somebody to come and protect them and defend them. But I feel like, you know, for a lot of women of color, they're not granted that same level of, I don't know what that is, like, concern.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
so that was a long-winded
answer. No. I think it's really fair, because I think, like what you said, a lot of people aren't comfortable, especially in well, generally, I think if you're a woman and you say you're not a feminist, people look at you like, oh, so you just want to stay at home? Yeah. And I think in academia, if you say you're not a feminist, then people look at you, especially studying gender and sexuality, people look at you like, oh, are you confused? And so for me, I do consider myself a feminist, but I find I encounter issues all the time. And so I think that one of the things that you really highlighted, that is where it's most of my contention, is, like, I feel that the issues that affect women of color are always overlooked, and that mainstream feminism, and when we mean mainstream, we just mean, like, popular, like, what is majority of people don't really see the issues that I'm most concerned about, in terms of mothers being separated from their children when they're through these mass deportations. Trump making policies of family separation.
What? Mainstream white feminists would never.
No.
What? They would never put their necks out there to say, we need to keep mothers with their children.
Yeah,
never.
So I always feel like sometimes it feels like what would be expected is for me to put my issues that are relevant to me and important to me, to the side in order to address what's most right now, I think, what's really guiding the conversation in feminism, which is Me Too, sexual assault. But I think that you bring a good point in terms of, like, white feminism. And when we talk about white feminism, we're talking about, like, as I kind of described in the chronology of feminism, it started with, like, a lot of white women addressing a lot of issues that were impacting them, because, as you said, like, women of color, and especially black women, were already working. They already were treated really horribly. And so when I see, like, for example, Lena Dunham, she is a white woman.
As much as I love girls.
I actually never seen it. She's a white woman who's a feminist, and she recently wrote an article on Vogue. Vogue loves letting her write stuff. And so she wrote an article of Vogue about which I read both because I'm the type of person that, like, if I'm going to criticize you, I'm going to read about what you say so I can criticize you. I wrote 2 of her articles. One was about how she had a hysterectomy. And
she did.
Yeah, she had to get one because of medical issues, and how her response was, in this medical setting, in this world, you're viewed as, like, really horrible if you make the decision to take out your reproductive organs. And so I felt her with that. I was like, yeah, women are always viewed as, like, you cannot be fulfilled unless you have a child. Yeah. So I read that article. I was like, okay, we're about the same age. I can totally understand.
Oh, is she?
She's like our age.
Oh, I did not
It's like in
know
2030s. And so the second article I read was about her saying that she understands that the internet hates her teeth. It was legit about how she had this huge insecurity about her teeth. People really just gave her so much shit about her teeth. How it was really like a reflection of just how women are once again only like looked at, you're only important to be pretty. And I'm kind of thinking
she should do like Cardi. She has a bag. Like,
I know, but I mean, I was just like, so Vogue let her write this article about her teeth. Nobody cares. And yet there are, like, I read a story about a woman who was separated from her child while they were getting separated through deportation, and that, like, no one gives a shit about. Or high mortality rates. Or the fact that, women are losing reproductive rights. So sometimes,
or the fact that, I mean, what about when they were was it in DC when they were giving black women those shots that were preventing them from having that were making them infertile?
Oh shit, no.
Yeah, I think that was like a year or 2 ago. It wasn't even that long ago.
Oh my god. But historically we've done that to people.
Yeah, but it's like when would like the poster child, I'm not even sure who the faces are. I mean, obviously
she's
celebrities.
A poster child. Lena Dunham
or
is
like
a poster
Amy
child.
Schumer, who like she cannot get
Schumer.
over. Like, girl, you're a little thick. It's fine.
And her new movie's coming out where she's exactly talking about that, about how you should be comfortable with your own bodies. And I'm like, I totally get that, Amy Schumer, but there are also real issues happening to women of color. So when I encounter things like families being separated through deportation in my community, and then I go on Vogue and I see that Lena Dunham wrote an article about her teeth, I'm kind of like, is this really what feminism? And the fact that it's in Vogue is like, who reads Vogue? Like, who's going to go online and read Vogue other than me to like look at what Lena Dunham's writing? But like, I think the demographic for Vogue is white. I think that, and why I think that is because of the content that they have. They always highlight like Gwyneth Paltrow. They always highlight Lena Dunham. They always highlight Kim Kardashian. And I'm just thinking, it's just really frustrating for me to try to like carve out a space within feminism and say that I want to bring the voices of my community, but then just everywhere I look, all I'm getting is signals that say, but this isn't what's important to us. And so I think that although I consider myself a feminist today, I honestly have had very difficult conversations with myself where I'm like in the same boat you are, and I'm like, I feel like in my own work, I'm addressing issues of race, issues of the intersections of sexual orientation and gender, but I don't feel that when I go out to a women's march that the issues that I'm most concerned about are the issues that most of the women in that crowd even know or are concerned about. So, and then kind of feeling left out and feeling like, is there space for me? Is there space for Zama in this feminism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, if I were to identify in any way with feminism, I would have to preface it with black. I would, and I think that a lot of black women that like, friends and stuff have, kind of gone in that direction in order to find, like you're saying, space for themselves in the feminist movement. They've had to identify as black feminists to separate themselves from the mainstream movement. And so I think that when knowing what feminism actually is and what it's actually supposed to do, I could technically identify with that version of feminism. But because I know that if I do give myself this label, I will be kind of grouped in with these women like Amy Schumer and like Lena Dunham. Like, I just don't see myself represented in their movement, and I don't think that the definition that they have of their movement, the concerns that they have, include people like me.
Yeah.
I just really don't think it's of concern to them. And I think that for the Women's March, one of the big questions that people had was like, well, you see a lot of diversity at this Women's March that was organized predominantly by white women, but where are these same white women at marches and kind of demonstrations that are put together and organized by people of color?
Yeah.
You don't see them. You don't see them.
You don't see them at DACA rallies. You don't see them at Black Lives Matter protests.
And you wouldn't, because that's not their concern. I think that right now the biggest concern for the feminist movement is wage equality. Which I think is important. But meanwhile, you have Black women founding movements like Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
Where they aren't even, Black Lives Matter is not even women centric.
Yeah.
So like they're seeing an issue that's plaguing their community, plaguing men in their community, men who are sons, fathers, brothers, husbands, grandfathers, etc., etc. They are prioritizing, Black women are putting together a movement that prioritizes men in their community, men who are potentially their loved ones. And so I think that that I think to me just kind of underscores what our focuses are. Like Amy Schumer's concerned about her body image.
Yeah.
Which, body image is important. Like, I don't want to discount that, because I know that is an important concern. But when you have another group of people whose primary concern is, the death of men in their community, or the deportation of parents in their community, like we just have to have different concerns. We can't be worried about that. We can't afford to, because if we don't speak up for us, no one else will. And we see that. That's we know how, like, for instance, Black women know how the world views Black men, and we know that a movement for Black men, led by Black men, would be muted. And so we are seen as, by the world as problematic, but a little bit less so. Like we're still problematic, but we're not dangerous. And so they'll allow us to start a movement. They'll allow us to be the face of a movement. And that's my focus. And as long as mainstream feminism is not concerned about it, I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah. And I think that goes into, and one of the issues that I had was like, can you be intersectional and not a feminist? And I bring that up because I went to a conference that was specifically on intersectionality. And the panel was 2 white women and 1 Black woman. And they all gave the presentations. And at the end, they do question and answers. One of the questions was, are you a feminist? Which I was surprised. I know, I was surprised. And I was glad this happened, though, because of the response.
Whoa.
And so the 2 white women took their turn, and they're like, of course. The Black woman stood up and said, no, I'm not. Didn't give an explanation, just said, no, I'm not. And you could tell that the people were like, oh, what? And I think that the person who asked the question, I forgot if she was white or not, because I just can't get past the response of the Black woman in the room being silent. But I think that it just highlights, like, the white women were for reals, like, oh my gosh, what? Why is she here? Like, you could tell they were, like, hella concerned, and I was just, like, thinking about you, and you being someone who is an intersectional, someone who uses the intersectional framework in their work and considers themselves an intersectionalist, but not a feminist. I'm like, okay, so that is possible, not only because I saw it in a conference, but because you're here and you're telling me that. And so I think that, what do you think? Like, do you think that maybe more people should be able to feel more comfortable? Is that just another kind of issue that we have as women of color, where we don't even feel comfortable saying to white women that, like, I'm not aligned with you? And does that also highlight that, like, white women are so naive as to how we feel, that they are so oblivious that they're kind of like, oh, wait, you don't feel included?
Yeah. No, I think that story is just so funny to me because I mean, I'm always so amused. I wish that I had more of that courage. I'm always so amused and in just kind of like sheer adoration for women of color that don't care about disturbing the peace. They don't care about making, like, I love women of color that do not care about making white people uncomfortable, you know, and I think that that's important. I do think it's important, and I think that I am growing in, you know, my comfort and willingness to do that, just because I recognize that these people ain't gonna give me nothing that I didn't work for. And they do, while they do have the capacity to take it away, at the end of the day, people, minorities, and especially poor minorities, are creative as heck. And I think that I've inherited a lot of that. So even if they did try to, like, say in academic spaces, try to take away something or discredit me because I said something, I'll just find another outlet. So coming to that realization has been a 4-year long, well, I would say maybe 3.5, because I think I've kind of been in this space for like at least the last 6 months. But it was a 3-year long period where I, felt like, all right, I need to, as the black girl, I need to not be loud. I need to not be a stereotype, And so, yeah, so I really like that story, and I wish I knew that woman's name, because I think that that's awesome for her to be able to do that.
I mean, and looking back, I feel what you're saying, and I think that sometimes people, in order to really contextualize our experience, is that it's actually, like, being in academia and being a woman, we're already a small percentage. Yeah. But being a woman of color, we're an even smaller percentage.
Even in our department.
And even in our department. Which,
and at our school.
Which actually, compared to other departments, has a little more diversity, a little more color. But still, like, there are times where I am the only Latina in a room, and they're talking about immigration. Yeah. And so, like, there's white people talking about deportation rates, and then just, like, going and having lunch at Chipotle. Yeah. And I'm, like, sitting there being like, yeah, my stepdad's been deported before. My mom's came here illegally, and, I mean, so technically so did I. And just thinking, like, I am not on this. I just don't feel like this is my space. And so I'm not there yet where I feel like I can really tell people, like, nah, your feminism isn't my feminism. And I would like people that. I would like to be. Yeah. And I think that this podcast is a good way for us to be able to, like, it's really hard for women of color in academia to have a voice, because sometimes it's either uncomfortable or it takes a lot of emotional, like, work to be able to not only say that, but to be okay with the responses. And so I feel like it was really important for us to have this conversation about feminism, because I just know that a lot of people are going to be surprised at, like, things that we talk about, because there's this assumption that you do gender work, you do sexuality work, so you're on the same page as everyone else who says that they're a feminist, that you are. And me identifying as a feminist, I think that people assume that I'm totally on board with everything, that I support everyone who's a feminist, that I have, I'm going to go out there to the women marches and be super happy, but really trying to find a space so that we can say that there are a lot of issues that feminism and mainstream feminism is not addressing within our communities, and that results in us feeling like we need additional spaces to be able to voice these issues that we have and that are important to us.
I think another thing, I can recall a few instances where I think that it is also hard and I'm not sure if you feel this way too, I'm not sure if we were getting to this, but I think that oftentimes, I'll speak directly to about black women experiences. So the experiences of black women often get lost in a lot of movements, so movements that are about race, and movements that are race-based and movements that are gender-based. And because race-based movements tend to focus on or highlight issues facing men. So, like, even, for instance, in terms of mass incarceration, right? Like, tons of black women are in prison, but that's never a part of the conversation. Those women often have their children taken away from them, put in foster care. There are a lot of women that have their babies in prison. A lot of times those women or their babies die. That's not part of the conversation. That focus is on black men. And then on the other hand, for instance, like gender-based movements like the feminist movement. So black women's concerns are not central to that movement. And so a lot of times I find myself, because I think that the issues that are plaguing me most and the people that I care about most are race-based issues, I tend to lean into those issues and to push those issues, and that's where I find myself getting the most outraged. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about it as we're talking about it, I recognize that neither of those movements are focused on me or, black women.
Concerns, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think, I mean, I'm problematizing the feminist movement, and I know that right now the conversation is not about race-based movements, but I do think that is worth mentioning, that it's not like, the Black Lives Matter movement is any more concerned about me than the feminist movement is.
Yeah, and I totally feel that. I mean, sometimes I even feel like, I speak a whole different language, and there are days where I go without speaking Spanish to anyone, and I feel like it's very isolating, and it's very, like, I just feel like I have a connection with people that share similar experiences to me, and you say that the thing that you focus, that there are certain things that draw you most and that are race-based, and for me, what draws me most is immigration, and that's because, like, people are physically being removed from this country and at alarming rates, and not just people, but like children and mothers, and not just children and mothers, but like people I know and like people that I love and people that are in my family. And I just it's just sometimes really frustrating to be like, well, do I have to go with immigration people for them to care about these issues? But there are issues that concern women, and so I want to talk about that, and feeling like there might not be a space, because like even some people don't consider me Latina as a race, they consider it as an ethnicity, and so sometimes I feel like I don't know where to go, and so that's why I just lumped myself to feminism, because I felt like, well, generally I can talk about gender things, but I feel like more recently, and this is totally due to the Trump administration, I feel like where I'm finding that I need to go towards it for my community is immigration and DACA and immigration reform. And so I look at the feminist movement and I don't see that that's a concern for them, and it makes me real disappointed, but not surprised. Because if we look at the history, we see that the experiences of certain people have been excluded, and the voices have been excluded, and when they're included, they're highlighted for a little bit to be like, oh, look, there were black women at the march. There was Latina women at the march. This is intersectional feminism. But then that's it. It's like, your intersectional feminism, it's not enough to have different colored people for that to be intersectional feminism. It has to address issues of those people for it to be intersectional. And so
that's what they think, is like, oh my gosh, look how colorful the march is.
Yeah.
Look at how colorful our lineup is for our concert segment. Look how colorful the politicians are that are represented. And it's like, no, that's not enough.
Yeah.
That isn't enough, because the thing about intersectionality that I think it's downplayed a lot, and that we underestimate most, is class. And oftentimes you cannot separate when you're talking about race. Oftentimes you're also talking about class, but we don't forefront it enough. And so when you're talking about black women and mortality rates, you're not talking about, you're most often not talking about the highest income black women.
Yeah.
Like, that is an issue that is most concentrated among poor black women. It just is a thing. Like, the working class black community is plagued with those issues the most. When you're talking about, just a whole host of issues. And so to ignore the issues affecting women of color, you're also ignoring issues affecting poor women. And there are poor white women.
Yeah.
But their issues are not a concern either. So it's like feminism, or the mainstream feminist movement, is both racist and classist, because we ignore the issues facing issues with healthcare.
Yeah.
You don't see mainstream feminists talking about that or addressing that. It's not like, oh my gosh, these women were able to, say pregnant women giving birth. If you can walk into the hospital and your insurance just covers everything, or you can just pay out of pocket and not leave the hospital and then get slammed with the medical bill 9 months down the line and find out that, oh my gosh, first touch that they make sound so cute and everything actually costs,
Yeah.
you know, a
Yeah.
crazy amount of money.
Yeah, they charge you for
Yeah.
bonding with your baby.
Exactly. And so that is classist. That is classist. The fact that poor women cannot bond with their baby after they birth it because they can't afford to is classism. But you don't see white mainstream feminism talking about that. Because to them, it doesn't even occur to them that that could be an issue. It's like, for them, it's like, oh, what's $900? Of course I want to touch my baby. Like, I don't care how much it costs. I want to touch my baby. But no, like, I can get so hyped up about this.
Yeah,
Like,
no. So I think I'm just ultimately really glad we had this conversation, not only so that we could kind of just highlight to people, one, like, just the time of how feminism has changed, but also how feminism, when you say feminism, like, there's certain assumptions that come with it. And so I think it was really important for us, for you as a Black woman, for me as a Latina woman, to express our experiences, you not being a feminism, me being a feminist, you not being a feminist, me being a feminist, but both having issues that impact us as women and women of color, and feeling like this movement, this mainstream movement, these movements that are spearheaded by a lot of white women aren't really addressing the issues that are most important to us. And so I'm really glad we had this space to be able to, if not only let people know that not, you know, or for me, like, not all feminists have the same, like, there are some of us who are really unhappy with the movement right now. And for you to be able to say, like, you can care about gender equality and not align yourself with this movement. And so I'm looking forward to any feedback. I know, like, people must have a lot of questions and feedback, and we're really excited. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation, and hopefully this can continue with you guys at home and with your friends, and you can bring this up and say, yo, did you know you can be intersectional and not a feminist?
Yeah.
And, like, hopefully gets you to ask your friends, like, are you a feminist? And they can feel comfortable to say, maybe I'm not, or I'm unhappy with the way that I feel that I'm excluded. And maybe you don't feel excluded, but maybe this will highlight that there are people right next to you that do.
Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Once again, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, please email us at woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our Instagram is at wokeishpodcast, and our Twitter is at wokeishpod. Keep a lookout on our IG. We're going to give a preview of our next topic, and we look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to DM us, email us, however you want to let us know.
Approachable.
Yeah, we're super approachable. And until next time.
Bye.